Okay, first thing, 15 ounces of water, 1 tablespoon of active dry yeast. Okay, so you put the yeast in there first. That's what I do. And then take your 15 ounces of water, pour it in your mixing bowl, KitchenAid mixing bowl, right? And you kind of want it to make sure it is all exposed to water, so it'll all dissolve properly. But then you just let that sit for a couple minutes while you get the dry ingredients ready. Okay, so I got 13 ounces of white flour in here, right? Put a tablespoon of wheat germ, right? And a tablespoon or so of dark rye flour. And that's the dry ingredients for the first step. Okay, so you see this is really well integrated. You can kind of see the yeast has totally been exposed to the water, a little puffy. And so you take your dry ingredients now, and with a spatula or a spoon, you can kind of add all this in there because there's a lot of liquid. So it'll mix up pretty easily. But then you just, you know, kind of mix this all together just so it gets mixed with the water. All the way to the bottom. Okay. And that's okay. Next, it's helpful to have a rubber band or something like that, and some plastic wrap. All right. Some of these things. Sometimes the edges, depending on the bowl, stick really well, but then the rubber band. But this one doesn't. So if I use this rubber band around the edge and then kind of pull it all tight to really kind of get out any creases. But now it's really airtight, pretty much, and that's what they highly recommend you do. So that is that for 90 minutes, hour and a half is done. You kind of set it in either kind of a warmer area, not necessarily hot, but you know, you don't want it in a cold area, and let it sit for 90 minutes. Okay, so now here I got my remaining 13 ounces of flour, regular flour, 7 ounces of water, regular, just tap water, cold water, and usually have an extra cup of flour around. You might need more than this at the very end when you're rolling out your dough on the second and third stages, but sometimes that's exactly enough. And then for the for the wet ingredients, you know, you want to add a tablespoon of salt. And I put this in this, you know, in a bowl here, and a tablespoon of sugar. Right, and I've got to add the barley malt into this too. And the barley malt is really sticky, so I kind of mix this up a little bit first, and then put this thing of barley malt in, which is, you know, this makes molasses seem like thin. So that's kind of a tablespoon of this barley malt, and kind of now I just let it soak in that water for a while, because it can't stir it in right now. It's too dense. Now this was in the refrigerator. If you have this, if you buy it for the first time, you don't have to refrigerate it till it's open. So the first time you use it at room temp, it's much easier to work with. You could kind of pour it in there, and you could literally, it'll kind of still be like molasses, but it would come right off the spoon, and then you could mix it all together. But right now I gotta let it sit in the water and till it kind of gets up to room temperature. So then I can mix this whole thing together and it'll be totally smooth. The salt, the sugar, and the barley malt will all be just turn into a nice smooth brown liquid. And that's what we do in the second step after the 90 minutes of creating the sponge, and then we'll start integrating all these into that. Okay, so now that that barley malt all kind of just disintegrated off there, which is good, but I still have the salt and sugar and the barley malt kind of thick down there, so I use something, you kind of see still a little bit of that, but it doesn't take much after it's been sitting for an hour and a half to kind of whip it into a frenzy. Now it's like totally disintegrated everything, right? So that's my trick. So now after an hour and a half, take this off here and save that because you're going to need it again. But you can see that's kind of what I equate with that sponge means. It's kind of puffed up and spongy, I guess. Anyway, to this I add that whole liquid that I just kind of stirred up. I just add it all in right now. Alright. So now you just kind of use a spoon or a spatula to kind of, I kind of integrate this before I put it on a mixer so it won't splash back, because it's could be a little messy, but just a little bit here to kind of get some of that sponge and the new liquid integrated. Just kind of like that. I don't want to overdo it here. Okay, so now with the KitchenAid put on this blade, you can use the other dough hook, doesn't really matter. What I usually do first of all, at the slowest speed, sometimes I pulse this because if it's still starting splashing a little bit, but it really shouldn't, and just on the slowest speed kind of let that finish off the water and integrating into that sponge mixture, and you'll see this will kind of just all smooth out. Okay, I'm not sure if you can see that very well, but it's pretty much smooth, pretty smooth. And now I start adding the flour, and you kind of have to add this, or I added a small amount at a time, otherwise the flour will splash back. Now if you have a bigger KitchenAid mixing bowl, it might not be as full, so you could add a little more at a time, but it doesn't take that long to add it like this. You don't want to add it too fast. You want to have it be able to kind of, the wet dough will kind of pull at the flour on the sides until it brings it into the fold there. And add some more in. See it splash there a little? And I'm down to the last bit, so I'll just pour the rest in. So I've ended up using all the flour. And I don't know if you can see it yet, I'll get another shot of it. There's still quite a bit that's sticky, and usually on a traditional dough recipe I've made, the ball would just pull all the flour into it and it would be a bit drier. But this stays kind of a little on the wet side, but that's fine. And you want to let this go like this. They say in the book to kind of mix it for about 5 minutes, so you just let it go. You know, for another couple minutes. So before that goes in here, you want to oil the bowl. Like that, some olive oil. And then once that's done, you can kind of take this, which is still pretty wet and sticky. Alright, out of here, and kind of have to scrape it out because it's sticky in there into the oiled bowl. And now you want to cover this again with, I'm using the same piece of cellophane here, it's a rubber band. Alright, there's barely enough cellophane here to get it under the rubber band. Okay, and that's nice and sealed. You let it sit for another 45 minutes. Okay, so this you take some of that flour that you used, a lot of it actually, kind of cover a big area here. Because this can spread here, so this has been rising for 45 minutes. Alright, and I probably need a spatula. It's pretty oily in there, but kind of scoop it out all onto the board in one ball there. Alright. And kind of spreads, right? On the top, what you want to be able to do is just kind of fold it in force like that, right? Into itself. So you get a little sticky. Kind of roll it up a little bit. Takes in a bit of dough. It's still sticky, right? It's very soft though, pliable. So what's going to happen now? I'm going to put this just back in the bowl. Put it right back in the bowl. Exactly like I had it. And where's my cellophane? Aha. This goes back on top. With the rubber band. So one more round of 45 minutes, and then it'll be done at least 10 minutes away from being done, because you usually want the last step is when you pour this back out on the flour, is cut it up into loaves and let it sit for about 10 minutes, ideally. And this flour has got, there's a couple areas, kind of see it in the center here, that have got kind of contaminated with liquid, so they're pour that back out, but I just usually just get rid of that. But the rest of it here is all, no chunks or anything. You can use that again, so that'll be the last, use for the last batch there. So you can see you got a bit of a rise out of it here. But that's the last time you can toss that sucker out. Okay, so the dough kind of doubled in size, I guess, but now you want to, for the last time, scrape it out. You have enough flour there. I still have a little bit left in the cup there. Get a little bit on your hands, maybe. It's very soft. And again, you want to kind of see how it's like a little sticky there. A little sticky. It's almost absorbed all the flour that it needs, so. Alright. Okay, so now you kind of cut it into, the size loaves you want. Which one? Let's see, you're supposed to make 6 like 7-ounce loaves or 8-ounce loaves. So those are fairly small pizzas, but you can make them make 3 big ones, 4 small ones, 2 or bigger ones, whatever you want to do. So that's when I'm going to cut these up. So I'm going to make 6 here. That's kind of what the recipe calls for. And, it don't really matter if they're exactly 8 ounces, but then I kind of shape them gently, really into something kind of like that, right? About that size. Kind of see those edges when you cut them. They're wet, so you're gonna just get enough flour on everything, right? And you just roll out somewhat circular, like you're making a loaf of bread or something. You don't have to pop all the air out of them. Just and we separate them enough to where they're going to spread out. They're going to kind of flatten and expand, so you don't want them necessarily to touch, or otherwise they will kind of stick together a little bit, and you have to cut them again when you're ready to use them. But this is basically it. They're done, and you can leave these out here really for probably a couple hours if you cover them with a cloth, and they won't really dry out. And that is it before you go to roll them out. Like, and I would usually, if I have the space available, I would roll out each one right here, have a screen off there, get them about the size you want, transfer them to the screen, kind of finish it off, and then cover them up again with a towel. Like so. There we go. And that will be good to go for a while.